He had his grandfather's logbook. He had his wings with him, and it told us this wonderful story. One we have actually was used in Angola as a frontline attack aircraft, so I can actually tell them, you're flying in a fighter. I don't care if you sat at a desk or flew the B-2. You know, if you want to go for a ride in a World War II airplane, come on out, let's go. And they would fly that in without any armament other than the bomb that they were going to drop on the radar site. Wow. And then they had to scoot out of there as quick as they could. Came back from World War II.
Yeah.
He would never talk about it. He was in a ship in the South Pacific, and I'm sure saw some really, really, bad things.
Tony Anger, you are a retired pilot. You worked in aviation for over 32 years. You retired out of American Airlines. And in 2016, you actually founded a charity called Grounded No More Veteran Flight Lift. And it's a Christian ministry that actually takes veterans in an old World War II and Cold War era plane and in a trainer, and you fly them around the valley and show them a good time. That's actually how I met you many, many, many years back. Is you allowed me to go up and fly in your World War II trainer. And I was just blown away, because the only thing that I've ever heard of you asking is like our Facebook page and let me take a picture with you for content. But you're not charging the veterans. You're just giving them an honor flight so that they can have a cool experience. So tell us more about that.
Well, it's kind of funny the way it all started. At the time, I was flying for America West Airlines. It ended up becoming U.S. Airways, and then finally American Airlines. And at the time, I was flying the B-17 for the Commemorative Air Force over here at Falcon Field. And was not even flying that day. I was just out there on a Saturday when we sell rides, and a young gentleman came up and wanted to go for a flight in the B-17. He had just come back from Afghanistan, and while he was in Afghanistan, his grandfather had passed away. Well, his grandfather was a B-17 pilot in World War II, and he was pretty much his mentor and the one that encouraged him to get into the military. He was deployed when his grandfather passed away, so this was going to be his way to memorialize his grandfather by going for a flight in the B-17. Yeah. For those who don't know, the B-17 was probably one of the most well-known airplanes of World War II, a big 4-engine bomber. There's about 5 of them left in the world now, so a pretty rare treat. Obviously, these airplanes are incredibly expensive to operate, and he had read an ad about going for a ride, and he thought it was $42.50. When he found out it was $425, the poor kid about passed out, and I felt awful. I was really thinking about just going up and paying for the ride because I loved his story. He had his grandfather's logbook. He had his wings with him, and it told us this wonderful story. But I felt God kind of nudging me to do more, and I just purchased a 1943 Fairchild PT-26, which was a Canadian trainer. It was an American airplane, but a Canadian trainer, and that's the one I took you up in. And I just walked over to him and I said, hey, how about we go for a flight in my airplane? It's one that your grandfather probably learned how to fly in.
Yeah.
And he said, how much is that? And I said, nothing. I was going to go fly. Let's go have some fun. I got so much out of it that I went home and my wife and I talked about it. We prayed about it. She said, you're out of your mind. We can't afford to do this. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to give it to God and see what happens. And to date, like you said, we've taken over 763 veterans for flights. We've done dozens of Gold Star families in our Romanian airplane, and now we have a 1942 Stearman, which is probably one of the most popular airplanes of World War II for training, and a Romanian IAR-823, which is a Romanian trainer from the Cold War. And the one we have actually was used in Angola as a frontline attack aircraft. So I can actually tell them, you're flying in a fighter. So it's really a lot of fun for us. But that's how it all started. You know, we just, like I said, we prayed about it. When I retired from American, we decided let's try for a 501c3. We were approved the very first time, which is, from what I'm told, does never happen.
Pretty rare.
You know, pretty rare. And it's just been a great success. We have over 4,000 members now. We have 5-member board of directors. One of our, they're all wonderful people, my wife included, but we have one guy, Josh Griswa, who runs Deep Sea Valkyries, who's been just an enormous asset for me because his group does a lot with PTSD, and we've learned with our group that we're actually helping guys with PTSD, guys and gals with PTSD, because that comes, as you know, from an adrenaline rush, and it's usually something very, very negative, where we give them a fun adrenaline rush, something to think about, you know. And I've actually had several people call me up, mostly their wives, saying, I don't know what you did up there, but he's telling me stories I've never heard before.
Yeah.
And it just helps people open up. It helps them feel, because we have a lot of vets. We have several vets that have seen combat that volunteer for us. Ted Gross is one of my favorites. He's a Vietnam vet who was a tunnel rat, and
Wow.
not the most popular job in Vietnam.
Right.
And he's in his late 70s, just had a quadruple bypass, and he still comes out and volunteers.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing, you know. And I give all credit to God, because it's just amazing what's happened in the last 11 years.
Yeah, and you're absolutely the practice what you preach type of man, because you are extremely selfless. I've known you for, I think, going on 12 years now, something.
Oh, Ben, yeah, at least that.
Yeah, and there's
Well, not quite. Probably because you came out, I think, the first year, so that would have been our 2016.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So about 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never known you to not be supportive of anything that isn't, you know, good for this country. Throughout the last 10 years, I've had all sorts of different things that I was doing, and not to name any names, but I've reached out to you multiple times about, hey, would you be willing to volunteer a flight? And you're like, absolutely. I love what those folks do. And you've just always been extremely selfless. And I would say the farthest that you go into like a shameless self-promotion is you just want a picture of the vet smiling, or, you know, the vet after their flight or during their flight taking a selfie. And that's just how you are. You're not asking for money from the vet. You're not.
No, we never do. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I was more than willing to pay it. And you were like, no, if you want to donate, feel free. But, you know, here's the link. But you're not going to stand in the way of a veteran going up in the air.
Absolutely not. And, you know, that's one of the biggest things. You know, I have a lot of groups that just do pilots, that just do special forces or something like that. And I said, I don't care if you sat at a desk or flew the B-2. You know, if you want to go for a ride in a World War II airplane, come on out. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know, I sat at a desk when I was in a guard unit. I didn't do anything. Scariest thing ever happened to me was a sergeant yelling at me. You know, so
I don't know. I know some sergeants that can be scary.
We ended up becoming very good friends, and so as far as I know, he's still alive down in Sarasota. So.
Okay. And you are, like you just said, you are a veteran yourself. You were in the Air National Guard, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you weren't a pilot in the Air National Guard?
No, it was actually kind of a sad story. I got involved in a program. My dad had flown. He was an Eastern pilot, and he'd flown with several guys that were Vietnam combat pilots, flying out of the Washington, D.C. Guard unit, D.C. Air National Guard. And he told me about this program, so I signed up for it, thinking, you know, all I was going to do was fly airplanes. I was going to be the first class of F-4s. And after we'd done all the initial stuff down at Maxwell and all that kind of stuff, we came back. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go down to Hondo, Texas for my initial training, the sergeant calls me up and he says, I got some bad news. And I said, what's that? And he goes, well, they canceled your class because a couple of guys busted out of AMS, which is kind of Air Guard. It's kind of like OCS for, you know, Army or the Marines or anybody. And I said, oh, I don't care. I'll wait for the next class. And he goes, you can't. You're too old. And I tried for several years to get waivers, never could. And then I was riffed back in probably late 70s, I guess, and just became an active reserve. So I would just drive out to the base about once a week, just see what was going on. And so I ended up, you know, everybody says, what'd you do in the Air Guard? I said, I ran errands. Because I normally would just, you know, hey, could you run over to the Pentagon and deliver this? You know, so I would do things like that. So, like I said, I didn't have a very exciting career or anything like that, but I met some amazing people. You know, a lot of guys that had been wild weasels. Look that one up. That's not the most safe job that they had. These were guys that would fly airplanes. Back in those days, they had the 105, and they would fly that in without any armament other than the bomb that they were going to drop on the radar site.
Wow.
And then they had to scoot out of there as quick as they could. And it was not a very comfortable or safe job to do. We lost a lot of pilots in that job, but I met a lot of the guys that had been there. And, you know, it just made me have such a love for these guys that would sacrifice so much for their country. And, you know, one of the reasons I love doing this is, you know, you guys are all my heroes, you know, and I get to meet my heroes every time we take somebody up. And some of the people we've taken up have just been absolutely amazing.
And this isn't for camera. This is 100% just the way that you are. And for me, I was like, yeah, I'm a combat vet, but whatever. I'm not thinking, and I still don't, that I'm any better than anyone else. I'm just a man who lived a life, right? And I was like, oh, you're a veteran too? Like, good to meet you, brother, when we first met.
Yeah.
And you just very much had an attitude of like, well, you're the real hero. And I mean, so much, and especially who I was at that point, it was hard for me to accept anything like that.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
You know, not to get off topic about how absolutely amazing you are. However, I remember when I came home, I'm serious, but I remember when I came home after both deployments, my mom and my sister showed up at the airport, and they're like, "That's my hero," and they're clapping, and I'm like, "Don't do that," you know.
Yeah, don't embarrass me.
Right. Well, and it wasn't even so much that; it was just a ton of anxiety.
Oh yeah.
And there's a whole, you know, PTSD aspect to it of understanding what really transpired, you know. But that's a whole nother topic of just the idea of being in the military and fighting in the war. And I had a lot of, I'd almost say like survivor's guilt.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the biggest problems, you know, is the survivor guilt. I know that was the same with my dad when he came back from World War II.
Yeah.
He would never talk about it. He was in a ship in the South Pacific, and I'm sure saw some really, really, you know, bad things.
Yeah.
And it used to crack me up because I thought the whole time he was in World War II was just dealing with the girls in the Philippines because he would talk about how friendly they were. That's all I ever heard. You know?
Right.
So I had no idea all the stuff that he kept under the surface, you know, and sadly passed away when he was only 58 years old, you know, and I think a lot of that was due to the stress and, you know, what happened to him in World War II.
Absolutely.
And it gave me just such an amazing admiration for the people that did things like that. You know, I wanted that to be me. You know, I realize now that God really blessed me by, you know, giving me an airline career instead of a fighter pilot career.
Right.
You know, but just observing it and seeing what happens around me and paying attention, knowing history. You know, as I was telling Brandon earlier, today is the 81st anniversary of Germany surrendering in World War II.
Yeah.
You know, what a perfect time for us to be doing this.
Right. Right. And for me, it's looking at things like that, and it's something that, you know, young men and middle-aged men and older men right now can pay attention to, is like, it is healthy to talk about things. It is healthy to get that out because, as I've discussed before, I have oftentimes talked about when I first got out, I fell into that trope of I have to be this angry, you know, just constantly watching surroundings. And I'm still very security oriented, but I got out thinking I have to be angry all the time to everybody, and everybody is trying to get one over on me. And it's a really gross way to live. And so there's not a doubt in my mind that your father didn't live to his full potential of age because he was holding on to so much stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, it was so demonized in the military to reach out for mental health help. The moment you did that, like, you were vilified.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you know, if the military does it, the military does it. It is what it is. But now at this point, veterans, you know, that are out there, they should be reaching out for mental health help. Nobody is going to think that you're any which way. And we've had some of the hardest men on the planet in this studio, and they will say, absolutely, you need to be doing that. And I know some very dangerous people, and they see counselors because they're attempting to hold it all together. We're all just these little bundles of anxiety attempting to figure out how to navigate day-to-day life. And if you're not reaching out for help, it's going to swallow you up.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is, you're living a military life, and I see it a lot with vets that made a career out of the military coming to civilian life and just have no clue how this works. I told this guy to do that, and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you're not in the military anymore.
Right.
You have to be nice to people now.
Right.
You can't just order them around. But what's I think what's fun with our group is we give them a very, very fun experience and let them know that they are among brothers and sisters, and it's a place where you can be comfortable, that you don't have to, and what happens here stays here. We're not Vegas. There's no gambling.
Right.
But we
bet you're going to have a good time.
But I guarantee you're going to have a good time.
Yes,
we've never had anybody leave and not, either being tears from happy tears or just smiling and laughing. And I think one of the most personal ones that ever got me was about 5 years ago.
I'm sure you've probably heard people talking about peptides. It piqued your interest, you looked into it, but you don't know what source to trust. A lot of this stuff is coming out of China. If you're looking for a good quality peptide that's made in the United States, go to helixpure.com.